Welcome to Kathryn Raaker's World. Innovation, culture, adventure, fashion and health, artists, destinations, traditions. This is Kathryn Raaker's World.
Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Kathryn Raaker's World. I'm so honored to have Dan Perkins, who says that writing becomes a part of you, who you really are. It completes a person. Dan writes commentaries, opinion pieces, children's books, newspaper articles on various topics, and content for radio and TV programs. Dan's financial money management business for many years provided a reason to keep himself entrenched in politics and current events. It made sense to know what was happening, but he realized that his interest in the political world was much greater than just the financial portion. It became his passion, eventually leading him to his first book series. In between writing books, he developed a keen nose for what is real news and what is not. He soon realized that not all reported news is factual, unbiased, and comprehensible. So he began his quest to provide a way for people to understand what it is being written between the lines. He wants people to realize that much of our news is swept under the rug or deemed unnecessary for the average citizen. It has become a way for big business and government to control what we read, hear, and understand. He sheds light by partnering with such reputable publications as Newsmax.com, LiveSaid.com, DailyCaller.com, TheHill.com, ReaganBaby.com, TheDailySurge.com, and many, many others. And guess what? He's an expert on our show and been my friend for years and years.
True.
And he has the same values as I do, which makes it easy for me to be with him on this wonderful show today. And today, there's so much going on in this world. You just can't even keep up with it anymore.
Right.
So I'm going to say this, and that is that let's talk about the 25th Amendment and everything that's going on with President Biden. And, the 25th Amendment, the vice president and majority of cabinet could declare the president unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. And if the president disputes the determination, 2/3 of the House and the Senate must vote to put the vice president in charge. We're going to talk about that and many more. So welcome to our show. I wanted to give you that big tribute because you deserve it.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Kathryn.
You're welcome.
And yes, we have been friends for a long time, and you've been a big supporter and encouraging person for me. So I appreciate that a lot.
I was with your first book on the series. Remember that?
Yes, ma'am. That was a long time ago.
And I couldn't put the book down. How about that?
So I want your audience, I'm going to say this a couple of times.
Okay.
You need to understand what the Constitution says.
Mhm.
When these lawyers on the Hill and the political parties start talking about the 25th Amendment, you need to go to ashcroft.com/Constitution, and they will send you free of charge a booklet that has the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. You need to get it, read it, and every time you hear a story about some part of the Constitution, go to the Constitution and read it. Educate yourself, because if you're simply going to take what people say on television or radio as gospel without checking it out yourself, you're crazy. So
go ahead.
The 25th Amendment was created after the assassination of John Kennedy, because they wanted to codify the right of succession, and then what would happen if Mr. Kennedy, for example, had survived but was unable to function as in the office of president. So they created the 25th Amendment. 25th Amendment says that in the event that the president dies or becomes incapacitated and can't perform the duties of the office, the vice president can poll the members of the cabinet for
Mhm.
their opinion as to whether or not the president is still mentally competent. Then they have to go to the president and ask him, is he sane? And if he says no, there's a new set of rules. If he believes that he is competent, and there may be political reasons for why people are trying to get him out of office, then because he refuses to resign or vacate the office, the Congress, both the House and the Senate, have to get in under the 25th Amendment and vote. And they need to get 2/3 of the membership of both houses to vote in favor of the vice president's recommendation for the removal of the president. Now, that's what Article 25 says. But let's look at it in a real time. When the report came out on Thursday about the president and the interview that the special prosecutor did, Kamala Harris went ballistic against him and against anybody who was against Joe Biden continuing in office.
Mhm.
If she never initiates the discussion with the cabinet members, he ain't going anywhere. If he says, no, I am competent, you don't have the right to take me from office, then the 2/3 majority. Well, 2/3 in the House is 282 votes. Neither party currently, if they got full participation,
Mhm.
would have 282 votes. So if the Republicans want to get rid of Trump or get rid of Biden under the 25th Amendment, they've got to come up with something like 70 Democrats to come along with them. By the same token, if the Democrats want to get rid of Biden, they've got to get close to 68 Republicans to come along. I don't think that can happen. I don't think, go ahead.
I was going to say there's another format that you can go with, a military tribunal.
That's because the president is the commander in chief. But the Constitution specifically dealing with the issues that we have in front of us with the possible finality of Biden, clearly the 25th Amendment takes priority. And so I think based on his demeanor at his press conference, that he's sane. If that process starts where she has to assess that he's incompetent or sane, if he's incompetent, he can come back and say, no, I'm not. And then it becomes the responsibility of the Congress and the vice president to prove that he is incompetent. Now, that's got to be a tough nut for the Democrats to do. What's ironic about this whole thing, the Democrats have been trying, and that's the very same day that this document was released, the Supreme Court was taking oral arguments on whether or not Donald Trump can be restricted from the ballot in Colorado, and in turn, all the other ballots that are trying to get him off it for violation of the 14th Amendment, not the 25th Amendment. And so I think you're looking at a real nightmare.
Now, why can't we demand as American citizens that he be tested by a person that is not in the cabinet or anywhere else, doctor that is, picked by somebody else, to prove his competency.
Well, I think that's a valid point, because the debate that's been going on prior to this recent situation is
Uh-huh.
how will the cabinet and the
Uh-huh.
vice president determine that he's not competent?
Right.
They're not doctors.
No, you need a
So
doctor, a
they're going
psychiatrist.
to have to bring in somebody or some buddies to test him. Doesn't mean that he has to agree to be tested.
We have a real problem on our hands, don't we?
Yes, ma'am. That's why it's not as simple. Congress from Colorado said, now, wait a minute. Here's what we got. We got a special counsel said he's not competent to stand trial, but he's saying he's competent to be president of the United States. So what we have is potentially, and I use the word potentially cautiously, all the activities that the Democratic Party were doing to try and get Donald Trump off the ballots in all these
Right.
states
Right.
may in turn be used against them, that Joe Biden can't run.
That's right.
And then the question becomes, the 25th Amendment says that the vice president will become, on notification and acceptance, the acting president of the United States.
I think that's even scarier.
Well,
In a sense, she's kind of reasonable, but you know, the thing that bothers me so much about her is that she laughs at everything. I mean,
right.
it could be a very serious conversation, and all of a sudden you see her like a laughing person, like on a comedy show. She's not serious at all. And that's the sad part. And do you think leaders of other countries believe in her?
No, she actually has a lower approval rating than Biden.
Yeah. And she couldn't even get any I think she had 1% of the vote when she was running.
Yes. So the Democratic leadership has got a pocket full of problems. So if the president is forced to resign and Kamala is now elevated to the office of president, she has under the 25th Amendment, she has the right to appoint a new vice president, and it has to be approved by both the Senate and the House by a simple majority. So she would have to. So the question is, what's the timing of something going to happen? Do you want this to happen before the Democratic convention so that they'll have time to come up with a replacement to work as a vice presidential candidate with her? Are they going to walk away from her in the convention and not nominate her for president? And if not, who are they going to bring in to run? So it's a really difficult situation that the Democrats have put themselves in. And the old saying, be careful what you wish for, because you might not like what you get. Well, that's what's going on here now. I think they're going to try and poo-poo it, that the report is not fair, and that there will be a reporter, I think, that will ask the question, Mr. President, if Vice President Harris decides to invoke the 25th Amendment, will you resign?
He will say no.
If he says no, then you know that whole thing I went through about the process and what's likely to happen is going to be that it's going to be a situation where he's going to fight. As he said, he is the most qualified person in the country to be president. But I said, and you tell me when we have to stop.
Okay.
But I said to my wife, she wasn't up watching the press conference. I said, in all the times that I've seen Joe Biden before the press, I have never seen as many mistakes, lies and mistakes in a period of time that I saw. And it was devastating to see that what he couldn't get out, he couldn't even get the name of the church where he supposedly got the rosary from where his son was buried. He couldn't get the prime minister of Mexico as working with.
We have to take a short break. This is such a stimulating conversation, and I mean, we're both very passionate about what's going on. So I have to take a short break though. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back with Dan Perkins and all of what's happening with the 25th Amendment, what's happening to our country, and why we are not understanding the Constitution. Thank God I belong to Veterans in Defense of Liberty, and that's one of the things that we teach, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So we'll be right back with Dan Perkins. Don't forget to go to danperkinsmedia.org, dan@danperkinsmedia.org, and we'll be right back. We're back now with Dan Perkins, commentator, author, everything he does. He's so creative, and he has his own television network, danperkinsmedia.com. And we're talking about what is going on currently with President Biden and the 25th Amendment and what could happen. And so we were just talking about, I believe, Dan, that the president's wife is behind this whole thing, along with Clinton and Obama and everyone else. They want to keep him there so they can control the situation. Am I right or wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right. In 2022, just to prove your point, there was a press conference that Joe went to that was over 2 hours. And try as she might, Jill couldn't get Joe off the stage, and he was making mistake after mistake after mistake. And the story coming from sources in the White House said that when he came out of the room, she went livid, not only on him, but his staff. How could you leave him out there for 2 hours? It was not smart thinking. And there are people now that are saying that the staff rushed to judgment, that they had to get out and say something right away. And so they didn't do a lot of planning or a lot of prep for him. So when he went out, he was basically trying to wing it. And as trying to wing it, he was making mistake after mistake after mistake. And so his presentation, his anger with the press, his mean streak was all coming out. And I gotta believe when he came out of that room, Jill Biden was there just screaming at him and at the staff for allowing this to happen. So I think you're right. I think she is a strong controlling force behind what's going on, but she in herself can't fight the Clintons and the Obamas.
So let's talk about what's going on at the border and deportation and a lot of other things, and what's happening with the police department in sanctuary cities. It's sad.
So I think we have to, I want to talk about deportation because I'm very concerned that Mr. Trump may have put himself in a hole that he can't get. I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Dr. Phil McGraw, who used to have Dr. Phil's radio television show, retired from that, was a supporter of illegal immigration. He went to the border and was shocked at what he saw and what he heard. He went down to the border thinking that the administration was telling him it's about 8 million to 9 million people that have come in illegally to the country since Biden was president. He says in his article that his discussions with Custom and Border Patrol think the number is closer to 17 million. Double. Now, what's important about that is that if you look at the numbers and you look at the daily number of what 15, 16, 17 million, it produces almost 400,000 people a day. So that the government has basically been lying to us about the number of illegals coming into the country.
Right.
Now, when they cross the southern border of Mexico, they have papers, passports or visas that they have to give the Mexican government so they can get into the country to go north. When they approach the American border, they throw everything away. So when they cross the border and is picked up by immigration, they have no evidence to prove where they're from. And so what happens is they come in and they go into a catch and release situation where they're released into our country. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's just say for conversation that it's somewhere between 8 and 17 million. Split the difference and say 12 million. If we don't have any information of where they're from, where is Mr. Trump going to deport them to? Their port of entry was Mexico. Is he going to try and deport 8 million illegals, 10 million illegals back into Mexico? And you can't say, well, you're a Venezuelan, because I don't have any proof that I am Venezuelan. And the Venezuelan government's going to say, I'm not taking them back because you can't prove to me that their city of origin or country of origin was Venezuela, or any of the other 150 nations that have sent people across the border with no paperwork. The other thing is, I don't know how much time we got left, but I do want to touch on it.
Go ahead.
Every case against Donald Trump is in trouble now. Every one of them is in trouble. Fannie and her lover, and there's been another complaint filed by another defendant in the case that the office was part and parcel of the deception that was being done. So they want all of the prosecutors dismissed from the case. That's going to screw up that case. Now you got Florida, Trump's official records versus the way they treated Biden. That's got to come up. They got a Justice Department is going to have to decide whether they drop the case against Trump or file a complaint against the president. And that's what's that one in. DC is off the docket. The judge took it off the docket. So the 4 cases that were designed to bring him down, and it helped build his tremendous lead because the American people saw them, that they were all political. There was no legal basis.
Right.
Donald Trump could be the next president of the United States.
That's what we're all praying for.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think prayer is another way that we can help as well.
Yes.
I really believe that if God is on our side on this, and people are starting, believe it or not, to go back to church like they've never done before. There's things happening that we don't maybe see, on the news or whatever, but you're seeing it and you're hearing people that are finally, like you said, waking up because it happened in their neighborhood, it happened to their family, whatever. And
the other thing, along with what you said, what you said was very important, is they're also losing their tax base.
that's right.
And Gavin Newsom in California is thinking about raising income tax rates in California because he's got close to $100 billion shortfall. But there's just for your audience, think about this. There's a difference between raising taxes and collecting taxes. Just because you raise the top rate to something higher doesn't mean that people are going to pay that higher, and you're not going to get the revenue.
Well, they never approved all those 80,000 people that were going to
The IRS?
The IRS. Did they?
No, that turned away. Turned away.
Good.
The other thing is, I don't know how much time we have left, but I do want to make one other point.
Okay.
If you watch the press conference with Biden and you didn't watch him, but you watched when there was an opportunity to see the press, I said a long time ago that as long as Biden has the press on his side, he'll be able to survive. What you saw in the press and the people yelling and screaming at him, and you could see the reaction, he kept jumping back. The press is start to turn on the president. That's usually a sign of the end is coming. When the liberal media starts to turn on a Democratic president, you know the end is near.
And on that point, we have run out of time, Dan. And tell us where we can go look at your commentaries and everything else you do. And I want to say something real quick.
Okay.
You need to go to yournews.com. It's
Right.
free.
Right.
Go
Absolutely.
on.
I want to remind people that my new book, Sad Eyes, is out, and the second book is about to come out for those people who are screaming at me, why can't I get book 2 when I want it? But it's coming out, and I'm really proud of it. It's a wonderful story. So it's Sad Eyes, and you can get it at Amazon, or your local bookstore can order it for you. And it's an exciting time. It's frustrating, but it's for people like me and you, that's chum in the water. I mean, there's lots for us to talk about. So as always, thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. You've been such a great guest and a wonderful expert, and I love having you on. And thank you very much for everything you do, because you stand up and tell people exactly what is going on. And that's so, so important. And thanks so much for joining me today. Give your websites out again.
danperkinsmedia.org or danperkins.guru.
And don't forget to go to our websites at Kathryn Raakers, Raakers, world.com, or Let's Just Talk, or don't forget the Chef You and I. Thank you so much for joining me today on Kathryn Raakers World and Let's Just Talk. That's